Hey, good morning, church. Hope you guys are having a great morning so far. So, as you know, we're starting through Ezekiel, and we went to Ezekiel 41. And as Brother Bob mentioned yesterday, the rest of this chapter is going to be about Ezekiel's vision of the new temple. And so, if you guys have been studying through with us on Wednesday nights, you have seen that through Exodus, we went through Moses' vision and what God told him to build as the tabernacle and the mobile tabernacle that used to be. And now we're getting a very permanent temple. And so the best way for me to describe this to you guys is tell you guys to go look it up. I mean, if you go look up Ezekiel's temple, then you're going to be amazed at the magnificence and the huge upgrade, basically, from the mobile tabernacle in Exodus to this very permanent temple here in Ezekiel. And so if we just want to jump on in Ezekiel 41, we see a couple of things that change from the old tabernacle. So the first bit is talking about the Holy of Holy Place. So the innermost part, the part that if you look through Exodus, you see that this is where God dwelled. This is where the altar was. This is where the mercy seat was. This is where God dwelled and where the high priest went in there a couple times a year to go and speak directly to God, right? And so we see that. So in Exodus, you see it's about 30 by 30 feet, and here we see it's about 35 by 35 feet. So you don't see that big of an upgrade, but it's still getting a little bit bigger, right? And so that's what that first little section is talking about. And so then you keep on going. One thing I wanted to point out in verse 5 said, "Then he measured the wall of the temple. It was 10.5 feet thick. The width of the side rooms all around the temple was 7 feet." So I just wanted, that's just crazy because 10.5 feet thick wall, that is a very thick wall. That's thicker than the actual room because the width of the side rooms were 7 feet, but the thickness was 10.5 feet. I just thought that was crazy, and they needed to be that thick because of how tall and how huge this temple actually is. And so if you keep on going, we see how huge this is. So you keep reading after that, and you see going into verse 12, it says, "Now the building that faced the temple yard toward the west was 122.5 feet wide. The wall of the building was 8.75 feet thick on all sides, and the building's length was 157.5 feet. So, my Bible translates it into approximate feet, which helps me personally to really grasp how big it is. And so that was just the building next to the temple. That wasn't even the actual temple. That's how big the building is next to it. And, if you guys look it up, you really see how massive the courtyard is and how massive the entire temple structure actually is and how big the temple has upgraded and how just permanent and huge it is, right? And so we keep going. This last section in chapter 41 is talking about different structures throughout the temple. And so the first little bit, you see that you look at verse 17 says, or the end of 16 says, "They were paneled from the ground to the windows." Verse 17 says, "Reaching to the top of the entrance and as far as the inner temple and on the outside. On every wall all around, on the inside and outside, was a pattern carved with cherubim and palm trees. There was a palm tree between each pair of cherubim. Each cherub had 2 faces." And so we see the awesome detail in the paneling on the outside of the temple. You see, multiple cherubim and palm trees on the panels, and how amazing and artistic that would look, right, on this huge temple. And so we keep going. Verse 21 says, "The doorposts of the great hall were square, and the front of the sanctuary had the same appearance. There was an altar made of wood, 5.25 feet high, 3.5 feet long." So this is a smaller altar, and we keep reading. It says it had corners and its length and sides were of wood. The man told me, "This is the table that stands before the Lord." And so this altar is fairly small. It's only 5.25 feet high and 3.5 foot long, and so it's not a huge one. And so it's more than likely going to be the altar of incense at the very beginning of the temple. And so as we continue reading it throughout the last part of this, and as Brother Bob said yesterday, this is probably one of the most difficult passages, and especially in Ezekiel, to comprehend and really understand. But the best way for me is to look it up and really just compare the differences and see how magnificent this temple is actually going to be. And they put all this work in to make this temple be huge and magnificent so they could please God. And I just wonder, do we put in the work? Do we put in the work to please God? Do we really, these people, 10.5 foot thick walls, do we put in work to make our walls, our foundation, God, and do we put in the work to make God happy? Because this is what God told us, And so, I hope you guys are enjoying as we continue this study and we finish it up, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. God bless.